16th. Thank you for that, Tom. Welcome to Cabinet on the 16th of November. First of all, I'd like to just outline the arrangements while we still are a virtual meeting. So this is our 6th meeting of Cabinet held under the new arrangements. And to remind those who have joined us online, this meeting is the consultation with Cabinet, as I have for the time being delegated the ability to make decisions to the individual portfolio holders. Previously, Cabinet took decisions collectively, but instead of the usual roll call of members to take decisions, I will seek via a show of hands Cabinet members' general agreement or disagreement with the recommendations in each of the reports. Following this consultation, the decisions of each individual portfolio holder will be published on or before Wednesday, the 17th of November 2021, and implemented the following week from the 25th of November, unless the call-in procedure is invoked. Thank you very much. Welcome, Ian, you've arrived. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence, and I believe there are none received, and we're all present and correct. Thank you. And then the item 2 is announcements from the chairman and or head of the paid service. Mark, do you have any announcements?
None, Chair.
Thank you. I do have one. I would like to advise you all that as from midnight tonight, the 16th of November, Councillor Walters will be leaving Cabinet. And for the interim, Councillor Stevenson will be looking after leisure and I'll be looking after health. I would like it to have on record my thanks for the hard work and support Alan has given not only to his portfolio, but to the Cabinet and myself. And I hope that Rutland can draw on his experiences and knowledge for the years to come. Thank you, Alan. And we now move on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Councillor Stevenson.
Just to mention, I think it's item 7 under the capital programme update. My youngest son has just joined Royce Rangers and it's referenced in the paper. Second declaration of interest, which is in the exclusion of the press and public leisure options. Both my children attend Catmos College, and again, Catmos College is mentioned within that report.
Thank you. And on that level of declaration of interest, I should probably declare one for the fact that I have one child at Catmos as well. So, Councillor Rozelle.
Chair, thank you. 3 declarations from me. A child at Harrington associated with Catmos. The second is in regards to Royce Rangers, of which I can have no part as I'm the chairman. And the third, that I am a veteran. In one of the papers, it talks a lot about veterans.
Thank you very much. So if we now move on to item 4, which is record of decisions, to confirm the record of decisions made at the meeting of Cabinet held on the 26th of October, pages 5 to 8. Are we all happy that that is a true and accurate record? I'm seeing nodding of heads, hands raised. Are we all in agreement? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Item 5 are items raised by scrutiny. And this is to receive items by members of scrutiny. And I would say that we have had one report this morning from the Growth, Infrastructure and Resources Scrutiny Committee submitted by the Chair, Councillor Fox, following a special meeting on the 7th of October to consider future leisure options. But as we have an agenda item on the same topic later in the agenda, I would like to propose the Cabinet notes feedback from the meeting on the 7th of October, thanks to GIR Scrutiny Committee for their work examining leisure, and takes their recommendations into consideration when we come to item 15, unless anyone wishes to speak on the report from scrutiny now. No, thank you. In that case, do I have a second for the proposal, and is that agreed? Councillor Rozelle is a seconder, and I'm seeing nodding heads and hands up. Fantastic, so that is agreed. Thank you. So we move on to item 6, which is a mid-year revenue report, which is over to Councillor Payne. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report you have in front of you today, Cabinet, is for noting and updates you on the Council's revenue position at the end of Q2 for the financial year 21-22. Just to remind you of the backdrop, when the Council approved its budget in February this year, to balance the budget, we had to draw on £1.1 million of general fund reserves and £1.287 million of earmarked reserves. At this time, it gave us a forecast deficit in 22-23 of £2.7 million, remembering that the use of reserves to balance the budget in the medium term is untenable and not sustainable. We set ourselves a target this year of closing the 2.7 million gap in reserves in 22-23 to £1 million. This meant a very strong focus on changing working practices and producing cost savings to close this gap. Cost savings were approved by Council in July this year. I am extremely pleased to report that in the 21-22 at Q2, we are forecasting an underspend of £1.5 million against a previously forecast deficit of 291,000. Any underspend having the impact of increasing the general fund reserve, which is good news. But note, we have also had to draw £1.54 million out of the general fund reserve for an earmarked fund for a rework of the local plan. The detail of the underspends and overspends that produced our favourable budget position can be viewed in your pack, but items to note are underspends of 400k in adult social care and 410k in children's services, driven through changes in working practice. A windfall of 551k won against a social care residency case in Cambridgeshire, and 130k underspend on resourcing contributed to this. But against this, there are still 11 out of 77 functions forecasting an overspend, which we need to closely manage. So far this year, we have performed much better against our target than originally anticipated, and I'd like to say a big thank you to the RCC team for the effort that went into this, that really appreciated. I apologise in advance, there is a but coming. There are many new potential pressures and uncertainty that are causing risk to the council. Just to give a few examples, we have some major projects that are causing concern that won't deliver the financial objectives they set out to achieve. The leisure contract currently under discussion and on the agenda later in this meeting won't be cost neutral. The waste contract is complicated by the Environment Bill, which changes the council's statutory responsibilities, but funding availability is unknown. Unknown at a time we need to go out to market, and that's assuming there is any funding on offer. We still have an unsettled pay award for this year, with unions currently asking for 2.75%, a pressure of 227k. The adult social care levy is a pressure of 172k. General inflation will put pressures on business as usual, employment, heating and fuel, and general running costs. There are impacts to the medium-term financial plan from the recent budget. The Chancellor declared the referendum threshold for the council tax is 2% with a 1% adult social care precept. Our medium-term financial plan assumes a 4% increase, not 3%. It is uncertain at present if we have the option to carry forward the 2% adult social care precept not levied last year. We are working our way through various assumptions and the impact on the medium-term financial plan. At the moment, if all the assumptions held true, then in 23-24 to 26-27, the gap is 1.8 to 2.8 million pounds, which is dire news. That means that despite all the good work so far this year, and especially remarkable because we are still coping with COVID, and really positive results for the first half of this year, there is still much to be done to focus on the future and put RCC in a healthy and sustainable financial position. We need to absolutely focus on the future and build a robust, measured corporate plan reflecting the council's key priorities, with financial sustainability running as a thread through all our thinking, and making this a plan that's lived and breathed every day. We need to continue to work. We need to continue to look at the way we work and question why we are doing things the way we are. Is there a better and more streamlined way of doing this, and identify projects that will introduce savings opportunities? We need to get better at managing pressures. We can't increase our budgets, so we need to ask ourselves, how do we do things differently to achieve the results we require? To focus on finance and manage our financial future in a more focused way, Cabinet and the management team will meet monthly to ensure identified initiatives have been delivered, and members and residents will be updated through future reports. We really do need to change our thinking to close our financial gap. Cabinet, most of the report is for noting, but you are being asked to approve the budget timetable that's in your document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I open that up to questions and comments. Councillor Walters, you look like you're trying to get your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've upgraded and now can't find anything. Yeah, thank you for that report and the introduction. I know that officers in particular have worked extremely hard at reducing our costs. As local politicians, we have lots of meetings and we talk. Have we made enough decisions and put enough into action to ensure that we get rid of our deficit in the years coming forwards? I know that we have a terrible shortage of funding from government. I acknowledge that. I also acknowledge that we can be solvent. We're a perfectly viable authority if we take the right actions. Are we taking enough actions quickly enough?
There's two trains of thoughts here. I know that the senior management team are meeting tomorrow to look at what else they can pull together as a series of projects to cut our budget significantly. So the senior management team are looking at it. We are also looking at how we pull together a financial plan that then feeds into the corporate plan. And as you're aware, that is still being pulled together. We have a series of projects that were approved in July this year that are still being worked on and worked through, and the progress on those is in your document. We're also looking at when we get the settlement in December and we understand the impact on our finances, how we then communicate and educate the public in a face-to-face manner about the financial situation of the council and the changes that are being made to remedy that situation. So that's all happening within the next couple of months.
Thank you. I see that Mark Andrews has his hand up, so we'll go to Mark first.
Or what Councillor Payne was saying, just back that up, is that, you know, members agreed a range of measures and more measures that we would explore. We need to prioritise those because actually, based on how much savings that they will undertake, the next step is, you know, your point is then, do we have a plan to finalise and close the gap completely and utterly? Well, what our understanding of our review so far is that the measures that we were exploring off the back of last council's decision is not sufficient to close the gap. Hence further and more detailed work that needs to be put together to present then councillors with options to close that gap. So we made good progress. There's an interim position which eats into that deficit, but it is not sufficient to close the gap completely with the added pressures that are coming. So we need to take further action.
Thank you. Councillor Rozelle.
Yeah, thank you. Karen, it's a really comprehensive report, and I echo the thoughts of Councillor Waters in the many hundreds of hours that have gone into doing this and continue. Would you agree then that the pressure that we need to put on the centre and continue to put on the centre to ensure that Rutland receives fairer funding is really important given the circumstances that you've outlined today?
Yes, Ian, I absolutely agree with you. And there have been meetings with the MP, etc. We discussed earlier the fact that we need to form an alliance with the East Midlands councils as well. But this is really to fit into the programme when we know what the settlement is, which will be over the next 4 weeks or so.
just following up from that last bit about, Councillor Walters was suggesting that maybe we were doing a bit of talking and meeting and not actually making decisions. And it is clear that, from the report that Karen presented, that we're now moving to a very different way of operating. And we're going to be making sure that we're actually taking actions on a regular basis that can be clearly articulated. And obviously I will be raising the matters with the various organisations I work with. Unitary Councils Network comes to mind, obviously the East Midlands Council. It is a pressure facing all counties and all organisations, and we are a very efficient one. So I think we mustn't lose sight of that in our abilities. So any other questions? No, so I guess, Councillor Payne, you're happy to propose this. I'm happy to second it. And the recommendations are that portfolio holder in consultation with Cabinet notes the revenue forecast as of September para 3.3. Notes the changes to the approved budget as per para 3.1 and Appendix A. Note the projected deficit of 22-23 is estimated to be 580,000, which is less than the 1 million target set by Council in February 2021. Notes that the revenue budget outlook beyond 22-23 remains challenging, with a financial gap estimated between 1.7 and 2.8 million. Approves the budget timetable for 22-23 as per para 8.3, and I'm happy to just get a show of hands if we're all in approval. And fantastic, I believe that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to report number 7, which is the mid-year capital programme update, and that's back to you again, Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the capital budget stands at 28.91 million as at the end of September 21. The bulk of this is funded by grants of £16 million, prudential borrowing of £10.5 million, and developers' contributions of £1.5 million. There is currently an underspend of 10.3 million against the budget due to projects on hold or not progressing, the most notable being a project entitled Commercial Investments that was held in case of any potential property purchases with a budget of £10 million. The Council is not actively seeking to invest in property at this time. Ceasing this project will not release any capital for other projects as it would have been funded by borrowing. The item may be removed from the capital programme in the future. Major capital projects are rigorously controlled through the project management process. There are only 2 of the 63 projects that are currently running that are forecasting to overspend. These are the Move from Brightways and the Chafing Place project at the active Rutland Hub, which total an overspend between them of £10,700. This can be funded from the Daycare Opportunities Revenue Budget, and the Cabinet are being asked to approve this move. We are currently holding £10.8 million of uncommitted funding, which includes Section 106 and SIL funding from developers. Cabinet should note that the Security Commission have requested a paper regarding how the SIL and Section 106 monies may be used, and this is being presented to the Growth, Infrastructure and Resources Committee on Thursday. Overall, I'm pleased to report good progress is being made in the capital programme with no material risk to report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I open it up to questions or comments from the board. No? Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for the work again. It was very clear and precise. I'm happy to second this. So if we're all happy, Councillor Payne, you have your hand up.
No, I was going to propose.
Oh, you can propose. So I'd taken that as given.
Yeah,
sorry,
okay.
I should have asked formally, shouldn't I? So if we're happy to just show our hands of support for this, that would be very useful. Thank you very much. Yes, unanimous, I believe. Is that right? Yep. Thank you. And we now move on to item 8, which is a mid-year report on Treasury Management and Prudential Indicators. And that's Councillor Payne again. You're working hard today.
I am. You have the mid-year report on Treasury Management and Prudential Indicators for 21-22 in front of you for noting. The key points are the Council has not undertaken any borrowing in the first half year and is still well below its limit of £33 million. No external debt has been repaid, as there is no business case to repay historical PWLB borrowing early. The principal loan of 21.386 million would attract an additional premium of 19.43 million for early repayment. So there's absolutely no point in doing this. No commercial investments were made as referred to earlier, as there were no suitable opportunities. As referred to in the previous capital report, we had made a decision to set aside £10 million, which isn't being used. The requirement for this will be reviewed in the budget for 22-23. We outperformed the LIBOR rate of 0.16% and achieved a return on investment of 0.19% through our investment strategy. Although slightly higher than the LIBOR rate, we are down on our investment income by £135,000. We have reflected this downturn in investment in our medium-term financial plan. The council invests with institutions as determined by creditworthiness criteria defined by the Section 151 officer. Investments are made by the council in banks, building societies and other local UK authorities only. The council has not invested, not invested in property or other commercial investment for financial gain, which is currently causing other local authorities financial difficulty. Just a final point to note, our investment strategy is defined under the auspices of KIPFA's Treasury Management Code and Prudential Code. There are currently 2 consultations running following KIPFA changes to these codes. RCC support these and will be incorporating any changes into their strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I open it up to questions or comments. No? Okay, thank you very much. So it recommends that the portfolio holder and cabinet notes the contents of the report, which we will duly do. So I don't think we need to vote on that, do we, Tom?
Not for a noting report, Chair, no.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So we now move on to item 9, which is neighbourhood plans indicative housing requirement figures, which is over to Councillor Rozelle.
Bear with me, Chair, I'm just scrolling through papers here.
That's right.
Nearly there.
It is a heavy report, all the pages we've had to read today. Bless you, Dawn.
So, Chair, apologies, thank you. There now. So the report that Cabinet can see in front of them this morning, neighbourhood plans, indicative housing requirement figures. It is that Cabinet approves the methodology for providing indicative housing requirement figures for neighbourhood plans, where these are intended to make allocations for housing development as set out in the appendix to the report. I would draw particular attention to the fact that the team at the County Council have been working exceedingly hard again on this. And I think important to note that within the document, it does refer to the February 2021 assessment for LHN of 129 dwellings per annum, rounded up to 130. That neighbourhood plan should look forward 15 years out to 2041. And particularly interesting figures for all to note, 70% of that would be based around Oakham and Uppingham, and the balance of 30% around villages, which is broken down again into 20 and 10%. And of the 70% Oakham, Uppingham, 80% of that will be based in Oakham and 20% of that in Uppingham. What I'm sure everybody will be interested in is the volume of housing in the appendix. But Chair, I'd like to open up for any comments and questions, please.
Thank you. I open it up to comments and questions. Councillor Stevenson first, then Councillor Payne.
Paul, thank you. I noticed under 3.1, there's no requirement for the council to consult, but I was just wondering what liaison had taken place with the various neighbourhood planning groups, and obviously the context within the local plan as it stands.
No, Councillor, thank you. What I can confirm is that there is a constant dialogue with officers around neighbourhood plans. And what I think is important to reflect on is that in the extraordinary amount of work that the officers are doing, they still manage to take the time to engage regularly with those neighbourhood plan leads and with the parish councils. I've been very impressed and humbled, actually, by the activity that officers are taking in that regard.
Thank you very much. And then Councillor Payne, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Just for the benefit probably of anybody that's listening in, you have in your table there worked an allocation for a number of dwellings for large villages. Could you confirm that this applies to larger villages that have neighbourhood plans only? And if there is no neighbourhood plan, this allocation doesn't apply?
No, absolutely. So I think the paper actually refers directly to 2 villages within the county. But I will take that question away and ask for officer clarification around that. Although we have Penny on with us this morning. Penny, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you. Yes. So the breakdown is an allocation across all larger villages, and then it's further broken down for indicative allocations for those 2 villages, the 2 villages that, the 2 communities that have currently reviewing their neighbourhood plans and are seeking to make allocations. So where a neighbourhood plan is seeking to allocate sites for housing, that is where we have the obligation to provide the numbers, and we can confirm what that looks like outside of the meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Thank you very much. So I just moved to the recommendation is portfolio and consultation with Cabinet approves methodology for providing indicative housing requirement figures for neighbourhood plans, where these are intending to make allocations for housing developments as set out in Appendix 1 to this report. So I hope you're happy to propose that, Ian.
Yes.
And I'm happy to second that. So are we all in favour or supportive of? Fantastic. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 10, and this is going to be the final highway strategy. And portfolio holder now is actually Councillor Rozelle, but obviously Councillor Stevenson is going to be doing the presentation because she has all the knowledge, I believe. Is that right?
Oh, that wasn't my understanding, because I thought that Councillor Rozelle would like to leap in at the deep end, but I'm very happy to be guided. I
will leave him to leap in at the deep end then. Over to you, Councillor Rozelle.
Thank you. I will leap in at the deep end, but I'll look to my learned friend with the questions that I may not be able to answer as we go through. So the paper in front of you is the final highway strategy. I can take no credit for it, having read it several times. I think it's a very comprehensive document, and again, is testament to the volume of work and engagement from officers and, of course, the previous portfolio holder, to whom I'm incredibly grateful. The recommendation is that Cabinet approves the final highway strategy 2021-2026 approach that identifies the optimal allocation of resources for the management, operation, preservation and enhancement of highways infrastructure to meet the needs of current and future customers. Chair, what I would say at this point is that in the few days that I've been the portfolio holder, it has become very clear to me that there are still some pressing needs within Rutland, which have been looked at in this paper and given due consideration. And it was really enlightening to me to understand just how much work has gone on in that regard. What I would also say is that it is quite right as well that ward councillors continue to challenge, and not surprisingly, at about 500 hours the following morning after council, I was getting emails from residents and from councillors asking for updates on works that they believe may be in train, and of course I'll be responding to those in due course with the support from officers. But I'd like to go open to questions now, please, and will almost certainly ask Councillor Stephen to support, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. So any questions or comments? Councillor Wilby.
Thanks very much, Chair. And let me thank Councillor Stevenson and for all the hard work that she's done in this area. I think there has been a tremendous amount of effort, and the fact that our roads are generally so good is something for us to be really proud of. One observation I make, which comes hot off the press from my Dibley last night in Ryle, and that no matter how much hard work is done by council staff and things like that, we rise or fall to a certain extent by the actual results of what is done on the front line on the roads. And I know, for instance, from my ward, there was a lot of, I think, pretty professional comment on the work that has been recently done, and we were very grateful for having the work done, but perhaps not done in the professional manner that it should have been. So I just raise that word of caution that we need to make sure that the people who are doing our job for us on the front line are doing it properly, because otherwise all the good work that is done in the council offices will get shot down by local opinion.
No, David, I'm happy to respond initially and then across to Councillor Stevenson. I think it's really important that quality assurance remains as part of the contractual obligation as we go forward. And indeed, if I may remind all of us that Fix My Street is a really, really useful tool in that not only does it allow residents and ward councillors to report defects as and when they find them, but of course, if there is an issue with the subsequent repair, then that could be put on Fix My Street as well. And I know that ward councillors are very good at responding quickly if there are problems. So I'm very grateful for comments as we get them. But Lucy, would you like to add as well?
Yes, thank you ever so much, Councillor Rozelle. Yeah, I think there are a couple of things to note as well. The difference between capital maintenance, which is our planned investment in the highways network, which obviously we have the annual capital investment programme. Clearly, big pieces of work will follow an inspection regime with that. And Councillor Rozelle's absolutely right. It's really important that that dialogue is happening from residents. It also comes at a very timely moment because, of course, we're going through the re-procurement of our highways maintenance contract. So therefore, actually, clearly, when we've spent money, we want to know that that money has been spent really, really well, getting the length of life. At the end of the day, we're spending money to invest in our highway before it needs urgent repair. So that's one point I would make. Fix My Street is very much about our revenue budget, which obviously, again, timely with Q2 outturn reports. Thank you, Councillor Payne. And I think, again, the importance of residents, ward members, parish councillors, etc., keeping that dialogue going with the department. At the end of the day, we are aiming to deliver the best service possible within the money that we have. And I would also just add a little note of caution. We talk about being ambitious. Our ambition is to maintain the highway network. At the moment, it is really, really challenging within that overall budgeting context. So that's actually a really ambitious objective there. And I think that needs to be clear. We obviously, under Councillor Rozelle's very careful eye, things will, I think, continue as we want them to continue. And I know it'll be in very, very safe hands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No. Thank you. No pressure there for you, Ian, then, with that handover. I would like to note the portfolio holding consultation with Cabinet approves the final highway strategy 2021 to 2026 approach, identifies the optimal allocation of resources for the management, operation, preservation and enhancement of highways infrastructure to meet the needs of the current and future customers. I guess you're happy to propose that, Ian, and I'm looking to Councillor Stevenson to second that. Fantastic, thank you. So all those that are happy to support that, raise of hands, please. I believe that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Just let me get back to my original note. So we now move on to item 11. I'll be there in 1 second. Which is the Armed Forces Covenant legislation, and it has my name beside it, but I've spoken with Councillor Rozelle as Armed Forces champion. It would be relevant that he should present this. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. The Cabinet will have seen the document already this morning, and I think the point is that the Cabinet are asked, firstly, to note the implications of the forthcoming amendment for the Armed Forces Bill for Rutland, and secondly, endorse the approach used to manage implementation of the new legislative requirements. In terms of trying to summarise the activity behind this, of course, members and the public will be aware that the Armed Forces Bill goes through Parliament every 5 years. It's reviewed every 5 years. Over the past 15 to 20 years, the Armed Forces Covenant has taken prominence across the community, and in Rutland, with over 20% of our population being representative of the Armed Forces, we have, if you wish, stolen the march on this process by using Armed Forces Covenant funding to employ an Armed Forces officer who has made a very, very significant impact, positive impact amongst the community, and ensured then that the Armed Forces community are woven into the fabric of our being. And it is really heartening to hear from members of that community, the Armed Forces community, that when they contact the County Council, they are held with due regard to their service. That is regardless of the legislation that's going through Parliament at the moment. Every element of the work that we do, whether it's health, education, leisure, housing, the list goes on. The reputation of officers and the work that they do towards the Armed Forces community, veterans, service families, is exemplary, and is to be held up, I think, as a beacon. The paper you see in front of you really is the end of about 10 years worth of work in Parliament, and what it will do at the end of this is hold us all to account under legislation to have due regard for the service family and veteran service personnel. I think I would ask Cabinet to note, however, that this isn't new business of Rutland. We have been doing it as a county since the days of the light cavalry, and with huge history of working with the Royal Air Force, now more recently the Army, and of course the Royal Navy, Royal Marines. I sort of asked the Cabinet look at this paper, would be very happy to take questions on any part of it or the Armed Forces legislation itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions? No? Okay. I don't think we need to do anything other than just note the contents, and obviously endorses the approach used to manage implementation of the new legislation requirements. So we now move on to item 12, which is the voluntary and community sector infrastructure support, which is over to Councillor Walters. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is the final part of the unbundling of our wellbeing contract with Voluntary Action Rutland. Much of this work I give credit to a working group that was set up within scrutiny, so thank you to them. The intention here is not to run the voluntary sector, far from it. It's intended to allow us to facilitate a framework for the voluntary sector to grow and develop effectively. We really must not lose the drive and determination shown by the public to come forward as volunteers during COVID. And I do seek support for these recommendations, which I think are fairly straightforward. It is essentially a holding position while we await mapping of the sector and further information from the CCG and how health might be involved in supporting us financially in developing the voluntary sector. So I seek support, but obviously happy to take any questions. Anything technical, I'll hand over to officers, of course.
Thank you. I open up to any questions or comments, please. Councillor Payne.
Alan, I think the document says this is for a year to develop the framework. Following the development of the framework, I mean, will you be keeping an eye on what comes after the framework and the cost of any support that might be incurred?
I don't think I would use the word "I" in the response to that one. I'm sure whoever holds this portfolio will be keeping a weather eye open on the plans going forward. I would certainly hope we would get more support from our health colleagues and that we can avoid using our revenue funds wherever possible, if that partly answers your question.
If that could be noted, please. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Stevenson.
Sorry, my hand was actually out of shot, Chair. Yeah, just to say I strongly endorse this piece of work. We all know how valuable the voluntary sector is for so many people in Rutland, and making sure that we've got that clear framework so all the different partners are working together for that overarching aim of living our best lives in Rutland is really, really important. So thorough endorsement on this one, Chair.
Completely. I think the voluntary sector does an amazing job right across, and some of it is actually unknown. It is important that we don't, miss out on the opportunities and the support these people are prepared to give. So that leaves me to say that the portfolio holder, in consultation with Cabinet, 1, approves the recommendation to award an interim 12-month contract for infrastructure support whilst undertaking mapping and development work with the voluntary and community sector in Rutland, and authorises strategic director for adult services and health in consultation with the portfolio holder for health, wellbeing and adult social care to approve of plans for delivery and any resulting commissioning. I assume, Councillor Walters, you're happy to propose this.
Yeah.
I'm happy to second this, and I'd just ask for Cabinet to show their hand if they're in support, please. That's unanimous again. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 13, which is the educational psychology contract. I believe that's over to Councillor Wilby, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. The purpose of the report: to seek approval to progress the recommissioning of the educational psychology contract, the contract to commence September 2022, and to seek approval to increase the value of the new contract. The education psychology contract. Cabinet will have had the opportunity to read the detailed paper associated with this submission. In essence, our local authority has the statutory duty of ensuring that the needs of our children with special needs are well met, and you will know that we are well engaged on a programme of training in inclusivity and trying our hardest to look after our young folks in difficulty. In Rutland, our most efficient way of dealing with those with psychological concerns has been to use the services of an education psychology service, and for us, it's Partners in Psychology. We have found this arrangement has become a tried and tested solution that works well and is better than other considered options. The pandemic has caused an increase in many of our concerns for both children and parents. This has affected all councils, and many have far greater case levels than ours, as I hear from my meetings with East Midlands colleagues. But as a result, we need to expand our existing contract to cover the additional need. The current value of the EP contract is 180k a year. It is estimated that our case numbers will rise from 82 to around 118 a year, resulting in a potential increase in the cost of the core statutory and priority casework to £100,000 per annum. The anticipated maximum cost of the new contract will be 193,500 annual cost, and this will amount to 774,000 over 4 years to start in September 22. This amount also includes 30k a year for systemic expenses and relevant caseworks, and this amount could be met from other grants. Of note, we will only pay for the amount of services that we use. So if we don't use the services, that amount will go in our bank. Over the 4 years of the contract, the pressure on the council's medium-term and financial plan will amount to 342,000. There is some scope for some of this to be addressed by the Direct Schools grant, but as you well know, that account is already in deficit. Importantly, we live in the continual hope that our financial income from government will increase to allow us all to manage our responsibilities properly and within budget. The bottom line, we are between a rock and a hard place, but are committed to do the right thing to safeguard our future. And I very much hope that I can count on your support. The recommendations that I ask you and I propose today is that Cabinet approves the recommissioning of the educational psychology contract to commence September 2022, approves the increased contract value, and approves the increase in the SEND operations budget up to a maximum of 85,500, but notes where possible, some of this cost may be offset by a recharge to the dedicated schools grant. And finally, it delegates the award of a contract to the Strategic Director for Children's Services in consultation with the portfolio holder for Education and Children's Services. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Open to any questions or comments, please. Councillor Payne.
Sorry, it's not a question, just Cabinet should note that, as David has says, this is an additional pressure on our budgets, and there's no certainty that we'll be able to fund this from grants. So I want you all to note that, please.
Thank you. I think duly noted. I think we're seeing that it may be chargeable to the DSG grant, but we know that that's overdrawn already. It's quite a sum. So any other comments or questions, please? No? So I assume you're proposing that, David, so I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Rozelle. So are we all happy now to give our view? Are we happy to support the recommendations? Unanimous. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 14, which is the exclusion of the press and the public. And there are two options here. One is that we could remain in public session, but we would obviously have to make sure that we didn't discuss anything in the exempt appendix. I would rather remain in. Sorry, Councillor Walters, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. I think you were just going to say the same as me, Chairman. Sorry. My recommendation as the portfolio holder is that we remain in public unless someone desperately wants to talk about the confidential information. So I would propose that we do not go into exclusion, sorry.
Okay, fantastic. Well, yes, I was about to say exactly that I would rather keep it all in open session. So I'm going to choose option B, which I move that the meeting continues in a public session, as I believe Cabinet will be able to discuss and agree to the recommendations of Report 161/2021 without divulging the content of the exempt appendix. Do I have a seconder? And I assume that Councillor Walters is happy to second that. I then continue to in a public meeting. So we now move to Oh, sorry. Are we all in agreement? I assume we're all in agreement. Perfect. Thank you. Item 15 is the leisure options, and this is over to Councillor Walters. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is something like 200-page document, so I don't propose to go through it. I hope everyone has taken the time to read it. And I haven't written a speech. I shall speak to it instead. Council Wilby rather beat me on this one because I wanted to say we were between a rock and a hard place, and he used those words. So I should think of some new ones. We find ourselves in an incredibly difficult situation. We have listened to our residents in the Future Rutland conversation, and swimming, among other things, does feature rather heavily. We've also recently had a petition regarding the swimming pool, and I give credit to the young lady who started that petition and worked so hard on it, and we do take on board the comments within that. I would also say that on Monday last week, I did remind all members of council that this paper was coming to Cabinet, and I asked for any questions to be put to me well before the meeting. I have checked my emails this morning. There are no questions or comments on this paper from any members of this council. We also have the report from scrutiny, and the recommendations within the report that are before you are not verbatim what was recommended by scrutiny, but they are as near as possibly can be. They certainly carry the spirit of it. So I do believe we have the membership of the council broadly on board with what we're recommending. It should also be noted that reports on sport nationally indicate that literally hundreds of swimming pools and leisure centres are currently at risk as they're coming to the end of their viable life, and there is an enormous lack of funding to refurbish or replace them. In coming to my recommendations, I have not only listened to Cabinet, to scrutiny rather, not only listened to the consultant who worked for us and to the officers who I know have worked extremely hard, I've also met with people supplying services within sports, and I've tried to take on board everything that everyone has said. One area where I have a slight disagreement with some is I do believe that outside bodies can support us enormously in resolving our issues. We already have an enormously vibrant sports offer within the county, and I'm sure Councillor Rozelle could speak eloquently on that one, but probably isn't allowed to. And the only difference is I'm not sure, as some have recommended, we should have lots and lots of complicated service level agreements with individual providers. I think that just creates another headache that I don't want to create. So in amongst the recommendations, you will see looking for opportunities to work with other partners. In coming up with the recommendations, I think it's important to note that the Catmos pool in particular is not in fact owned by Rutland County Council. It is Catmos Colleges, or rather their trusts, pool, not ours. I think it's important to note that it would be fairly easy to borrow £10 million and spend it on capital, because capital cost isn't really the problem. The real problem is the revenue cost going forwards, and I won't go into those details. So you have a number of recommendations in front of you, which I believe have the support of scrutiny. They have, I believe, the support of the membership, judging by their lack of negative reaction. It's important to note that we are not closing the doors on any new provision going forward, but that we have no specific plans at this moment. But we will go to the initial design or the initial assessment of what the art of the possible is, so that if funding becomes available at a future date, we are ready to move and take advantage of it. So I think that's all I should say. My apologies for the fact it wasn't a speech, it was just notes, and I look forward to questions and comments and hope you support my recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Walters. I'm open now to comments or questions, please. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you very much, and also thank you, Councillor Walters and RCC staff, as we've heard, it's a rock and a hard place. And I think that the recommendations are the best possible outcome for that. And it's very reassuring to have read the report from Scrutiny endorsing those. One comment I would make is that it must be a Rutland specific solution, in that whilst I completely sort of welcome the petition, it's really great to have that engagement and to get that vocalization of views. I did feel elements within the petition was a petition for a swimming pool in Oakham, and that it really does need to be, when we're working forwards, looking at those options for the county, because I know, certainly speaking as an Uppingham resident, having used public transport, it is easier to get public transport to Corby in that the bus stops within a stone's throw of the swimming pool, not so much when the Catmus pool was open, arriving at Wilko. So I think we need to keep really focused on keeping that door open, but a Rutland solution that doesn't necessarily mean Oakham being the venue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rozelle, you have your hand up. You're on mute, afraid.
Yeah, thank you. And again, Councillor Walters, a really good paper, a lot to read through. And like you, I trust that people have taken the time to read all of it. And sometimes it's worth reading these things through twice because there is so much in there that's really important. I don't have a question, it's a comment really, and it is around health and well-being, as opposed to sport in particular. There are multiple ways of achieving a healthy lifestyle, and Rutland is blessed with many of the natural resources that can be utilised to achieve that. And of course, I would be first in the queue, I think, if there were an opportunity in the future to create an environment where sports could be included at different levels for different types of individuals and collective groups. But of course, we must make it viable and we must make it achievable. And finally, we must make it accessible. And I agree entirely with Councillor Stevenson. Accessible doesn't mean in Oakham. Accessible for Rutland means for Rutland. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Wilby, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I think I'd just like to endorse all that's been said before. I find it really quite difficult to believe that we are in a county where we cannot produce the sporting facilities such as a swimming pool in a nice place that everyone can use it and take advantage of it. I know that we are blessed with many natural resources, and the great Rutland Water is testament to that. But I really feel that the art of the possible, to use Councillor Walters' terminology, is the answer. And I really believe that if we put our heads together and think clearly and think about the facilities that we have got in Rutland, and I agree it should be Rutland as opposed to just Oakham, but we have the OEP sitting out there, which is a lot of concrete and would seem to have pretty spatial places for doing all sorts of things. And there are other places, St George's, we obviously have spoken about. I think that if people put their head together and there is a good working with industry to produce the wherewithal to run the facility, we should be able to produce something which we could be proud of for the next 25 or 50 years for all our young folks to grow up and take advantage of.
Thank you. Any other comments? No, I would just like to pick up actually on what Councillor Wilby and all of you have said, is that, and I think it reflects back on the paper presented by Councillor Payne earlier, that we need to look at a different way of providing our stuff. So it's not necessarily down to Rutland County Council to provide it, but by being the facilitator and bringing people together to deliver what the residents desire and get everyone involved. So I think there's a real, breadth of things that can be done there. And we do have a very large range of sports clubs. I believe there's over 100 odd, and anything from archery to Zumba, so you can do the whole alphabet in Rutland. And I think that from that there is that voluntary sector, which feeds back to a previous paper on the voluntary sector, that actually we have the makings of it. We just need to learn how to put it together. So I look forward to going forward with this. I will now, unless there's any other questions or comments, I will just go back to the leisure options paper we've just heard. So that it's the portfolio holder in consultation with Cabinet. It's quite a long one. Approves the exploration of opportunities for county-wide leisure provision in partnership with Rutland Local Sports Alliance, determine whether any community-owned stroke LED options are viable. Oh, community-led options are viable. Sorry. Item 2 approves the development of plans for a pool and dry side provision, wet and dry, or pool provision wet only at a new site to an initial design stage using the existing project budget in order to build a viable case for a new swimming pool in Rutland, noting that progress beyond this can only be undertaken when A, significant, and that's at least 90% capital funding becomes available from external sources, or a partner body is identified that would be willing and able to meet at least 90% of the capital requirement, and that the new provision can be delivered at no revenue cost to the council. 3, agrees to allocate £250,000 of Section 106 developer contributions received to date for the purpose of providing recreation, sport and leisure infrastructure to a 225 agenda item 15 swimming pool provision project as match funding towards future provisions and investment in facilities. 4, notes that further repair to the existing Catmus pool, which has reached its end of life, is not affordable and the pool shall not be reopened. 5, authorises strategic director for places in consultation with the portfolio holder for health, wellbeing and adult care to enter negotiations with the management of Catmus College to agree the future of the legacy leisure facilities at a Catmus campus, including the option to let a new nil-cost contract for the management of all or part of the dry side leisure facilities under the existing or renewed leases. 6, authorises strategic director of places in consultation with the portfolio holder for health, wellbeing and adult care to progress procurement of a dry side leisure management contract if a nil cost contract is achievable and agreeable to both the council and Catmus College. Procurement implications will be reported to Cabinet before any award is made. 7, authorises strategic director for places in consultation with the portfolio holder for health, wellbeing and adult care to enter negotiations with other local providers for the provision of public access swimming. 8, considers the petition received at the council meeting on the 8th of November 2021 from members of the public expressing support for swimming in Rutland and agrees to report back to council on the actions taken in response. So are you happy to propose those, Councillor Walters?
I'm happy, Chair, and I take it that under item 8 we have now considered that petition and that the minutes of this meeting will suffice as a report to council.
I'm seeing a nodding of heads from Marie, so I'm assuming that is correct. Thank you very much. I'm happy to, you're proposing it. I'm happy to second it. All in favour, all supportive? Fantastic, that is unanimous. Thank you, Robert, for attending very briefly. So I now move on to item 16, which is any items of urgent business. I don't believe there are any. Shaking of heads, which is always a good sign. So I now just declare the meeting closed at 11:03, and thank you very much all. And thank you, Alan, for your hard work and commitment to this council, and look forward to carrying on working with you. So all the best.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye-bye.